Adding to this is the shorter time frame for Latin American migration. And this indeed has prompted geographers to be quite interested in this. It has happened in like 50, 60 years especially, which is shorter than American urban migration, for instance. And geographers have tended to find that the process has 3 stages. So the first stage is survival. Sounds like a different TV show, Survivor, but no, it's not a game show there. It is survival. It is life. When the people move to the city, the first thing to accomplish is survival. And that's because people are not wealthy moving to the city. The big wealthy people living in the countryside, they're doing great. They got a big estate. They're doing fine. Stay where they are. The people who are moving to the cities in Latin American migration are typically poor economically. They're hoping for something big, something better, something, improvement in life. So they are not coming with money. They're not coming with wealth. They are coming with little and hoping to survive, and then hoping to have success. In truth, almost everybody survives. So that's good. Almost everybody makes it past stage 1. Stage 2 then is informal, irregular income. I call it the 3 letters I to help me remember this stage: informal, irregular income. So this is often a cash economy. This is not a check every 2 weeks coming from your employer. This is part of the idea of survival is, you get to this point where you're at least getting some income, but this is part of the complications too. And that's because in stage 2, this is called speculative migration. You are speculating, hoping, wishing that you will get a job. That's compared to what's called contracted migration, a contract, where you have a job, it's assured, it's a deal, it's signed, you have the paperwork, you have the contract. And thus, your migration is reasonably safe. Right? When I came to College of DuPage quite a few years ago, when my family and we moved here, it was low risk because it was contracted migration, because I had a contract, right? I got the job, COD agreed to hire me, and I agreed to perform a variety of work here at COD, right? It was all in the contract. How many courses would I teach? What other responsibilities would I have? How much would I get paid? What would be my benefits? Okay. All of that's in the contract. Sure. So it's relatively safe. Contracted migration. Lots of our migration in the United States is contracted. We have a lot of migration going on for jobs. We still have some speculative migration in the United States, and maybe it's more like people of your age, people who finish college maybe and go off to a different city and saying, I don't have a job yet, but I'm going to go. I'd like to live in this city, and now I'm ready to go find a job there. And you move there, taking a chance. Okay, that would be speculative migration. But this is overwhelmingly the case in rural to urban migration in Latin America. It's speculative migration. The migrants do not have jobs lined up when they're going to the city. They're hoping to do well in the city when they get there. But That means that typically starting in the big city, it's informal, irregular income. So that might be day labor. It might be that you go get in line at a factory in the morning, and you see some people going in one door of the factory, and that's the core staff. That's the people who work there every day. They have the real job. That's, of course, what your ultimate goal is, the real job. Those people have it. They work every workday in the factory. But sometimes the factory needs a few more people, depending on the number of orders they have, how a business is going. Maybe they need some more. So you line up outside with other people, hoping to go in that day. And the boss or the manager or the foreman comes out early in the morning and he says, okay, today we need 8 more people in the factory. You're in line and, oh, it's your good day. You were number 6 in line. So great. You get to go in. They need 8. So you and 7 other people get to go in. You work that day. At the end of the day, you're paid in cash. It's the cash economy. You go home. All right. You made some money that day. But it might be that you were a little bit unlucky. Maybe you were in line that day and they said, we're going to take 8, but that day you were number 12. Okay. You don't get into the factory that day. You have to get in line some other way. You have to do something else. Maybe you go home and you have the day off. Maybe you try another factory. Maybe it's too late in the day and they've already chosen their people. Okay, something else. Well, there's many different possibilities in this category, informal, irregular income. Maybe you make a bunch of sandwiches at home and you go to the factory around noontime and you set up a table outside the factory. And when the workers come out at lunchtime, some of them buy the sandwiches from you. And you make a bit of a profit by what you sell it for compared to what it cost you to make them. And maybe you make a little money that day. There are a number of possibilities. Maybe you end up running drugs in the favelas. Maybe that's a cash job. Maybe that's what happens. Well, none of those are the jobs you were hoping to have. You'd like to have the real job. And indeed, that's the third step here then, is getting the real job. Maybe it's in that factory, but you are there every day. You don't have to worry about getting in line. You've now been hired on the core staff. So you get to be there every day. No worries, just go in, work. Maybe, in fact, you get paid every 2 weeks with a check. And that can be better than the cash payment because you can take that as proof of employment. You could go to an apartment building and say, look, I'd like to rent an apartment, and you can show proof of regular income. And that could help you get that apartment because then the renter, the person owning the apartment, knows that you can pay the rent. That sort of regular income does good things for your credit and for creating other opportunities. Okay, so that's definitely the goal. Some sort of real job, regular income. That's why they're moving to the city. That is the goal. Okay, but studies have shown that lots of people don't actually make it to the real job. Depends, of course, on the city, depends on the country, the exact numbers. But overall, it seems to be, on average, something about a half. Half of the people who move to the city never actually get the real job. Very few of them die. Most of them all survive and go on, but stay in that then informal, irregular income. Well, is that a success then? that is another question. And that is a question geographers like to ask. Is it then logical that people do this? When we know the results are quite mixed, is it sensible? Is it logical for these folks to actually undertake this migration? And to do that, we can do the math. So I'm going to mention deal or no deal again, following up on what we did last time. But here's another example of doing the math. The lottery. Mega Millions is one of the lotteries in Illinois here. And the odds of winning the jackpot in Mega Millions are 1 in 300 million or so, rounding it off to a nice number. Okay, and tickets are $2. So let's say that the jackpot for Mega Millions is $150 million. What then is your average return for playing Mega Millions that day? Well, that would be the prize of $150 million divided by the different number of opportunities or situations. Well, there's 300 million of those different combinations possible. So those 300 million possibilities, so it'd be $150 million divided by 300 million, which is then 50 cents. Should you buy a $2 ticket to, on average, win 50 cents? No, that doesn't make mathematical sense. You should not do that. On average, you are obviously losing money. The math says don't try it. Okay, but what if the jackpot is $750 million? Now let's do the math again. $750 million divided by the 300 million different possibilities is $2.50. On average, if you played enough times, on average, $2.50 is your average result, your expected return. Should you pay $2 to buy that ticket? Well, the math says yes, you should, because on average, your result is better. On average, you're winning $2.50 for every $2 you pay for the ticket. And then I add, well, maybe. I would say that if the jackpot is $750 million, then you should play only if $2 is worth it for the fun of playing, for the dream of playing that day. Because, of course, you're not guaranteed $2.50, are you? Almost for sure you will win $0. Okay, you're not, math doesn't guarantee you anything. It just tells you the average result. So if the jackpot gets that high, sometimes I do play because the math encourages me to play. But at the same time, I say to myself, well, it's just also fun. For me, okay, once in a while, the $2 is worth it for the fun. Okay, but what about then the rural to urban migrant? How do we figure out the math for that person? Well, we can know what the person earns in the countryside, in the rural setting, right? Because that's their life. They know what that is. They know what money they make where they live right then and there in the rural area, in the countryside. They don't know what they're going to make in the city because it's speculative migration. They don't know what kind of job they're going to get, whether it's a real job or just the informal, irregular income. So they need to estimate the income and the odds of getting that income. So, for example, we could just pick some numbers to show the math The math would be, let's take that urban income. What do we think we would earn in the city? And then let's divide that by the chances that that's true. Okay, so for instance, we could say, let's estimate that we'll earn $8,000 in the big city, and that there's two possibilities of having that happen. So we would take 8,000 divided by 2, and that would be 4,000. Okay, that would be our prediction for the big city. Our estimated return, our expected return, our average, what we think would happen if we move to the big city. So should we then move to the big city? Well, it would be our comparison to rural income. What if we make $3,000 where we are living? And we're predicting we would earn on average $4,000 in the big city. Then, yes, we should move, right? We should move to the big city because 4,000 is more than 3,000, obviously. Okay, so the math then would tell us, the math would say, let's do it. Let's move to the big city. But of course, it's not guaranteed. So with Deal or No Deal, when we played, we also did the math, didn't we? We used the math to predict the average result, the expected return if we kept playing, and we used that to help us decide deal or no deal. And that grid had 26 possibilities. There were 26 briefcases on the TV, each one held by one of the models. All right, well, I made up my own little 25 grid thing as an example for, well, what could happen to that migrant who moves to the big city? What could happen? Well, here's some possibilities. What could happen to the migrant? Well, the migrant might, in the top left, get a $10,000 job. That's one of the possibilities. The migrant might, in the bottom, get divorced. Might have a tough time and end up getting divorced. Might, middle left, get a $3,500 job. That might be it. Might, at the top middle, get a $44,000 job. Might make it to the real job and become quite successful. Might, towards the bottom right, might die. Might be one of those few people who don't make it past the survival stage. Might, towards the bottom right corner, might get a job as a maid in a rich man's house and be sexually harassed. Might, top middle, get injured in a factory job. Might, far left, get an $11,000 job, or below that, become a drug addict. Might get a $16,000 job, or might have your daughter taken in human trafficking. Might get a $20,000 job, or maybe your shack is destroyed in a mudslide. There are all sorts of possibilities for what that migrant might get in the big city, right? All sorts of possibilities. Ideally, the migrant does the math and tries to figure out, well, how is it looking? Does the math add up so that it looks like I will make more money in the big city than I'm doing in the countryside? Okay. That's the hope, of course, that that's true because lots of people do this migration. Or does the math say, it's just not worth it? I'll just stay here and keep doing what I'm doing. Well, just like Deal or No Deal, just like even the lottery, the math can guide us, though the math does not guarantee any result. Ideally, when we play Deal or No Deal, or in other aspects of life, we do the math to help us decide. But other factors are there too, right? So for In Deal or No Deal, the contestants get advice from what I call their posse. In Deal or No Deal, the TV game show, there is the contestant who gets to pick which cases to open, which case to select as the contestant's own. But there are also usually 3 people who are their advisors. I call those 3 people their posse. Okay? It might be a spouse, it might be a parent, it might be a best friend, it might be a friend from work, it can be anybody, but they've selected these 3 people to stand up for them, okay? And they offer advice. The posse offers advice. So the contestant has the final word, the final say, but of course is influenced by what the posse says. Maybe changing their mind based on what the posse suggests. Well, I think that happens also for Latin American Caribbean migrants to the big city. As they're considering whether or not to go to the big city, certainly they get advice from family and friends. Possibly some of those family or friends have already moved to the big city and give them feedback as to what it's like. Others may be, well, in the countryside with them, and they just offer their own advice. Maybe it's good advice, maybe it's bad advice, but it's their advice. It's their comment. And certainly that potential migrant then may have their minds changed by this advice, these suggestions. Maybe they want to do what their friends think they should do. Also, in Deal or No Deal, there is the studio audience there. And on the show, it seems that there are indeed quite excited fans there on the show. The audience is exuberant, and the contestants certainly hear the roar of that crowd, and quite possibly are influenced by that. If everybody in the crowd is shouting, "No deal, no deal, no deal," is that contestant influenced by that? Well, quite possibly, right? Their pressure of the moment, the pressure of the surroundings. Okay, well, in the big city, there's the bright lights, there's the noise of the city, and maybe those potential migrants then are influenced by that. They're pulled by what they see as the excitement of the big city, and maybe that brings them there.